Welcome to the Columbia River Inaugural Athletic Hall of Fame induction ceremony. On behalf of Columbia River High School and the community, we are honored this evening to be celebrating Columbia River's deep history and tradition in athletic achievement. We are here to appreciate what it means to be a chieftain. As quoted from Voltaire, appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well.
The Athletic Hall of Fame is a part of the many celebrations in commemoration of Columbia River's 50th year. This date was chosen for this ceremony because the school originally opened in December of 1962. It is also deemed appropriate to have Columbia River's inaugural Athletic Hall of Fame induction ceremony in the main gym on the evening of a home game. One of Columbia River's traditions of excellence is in athletics. In preparation for this induction, a Hall of Fame committee was assembled. The committee is made up of a select group of Columbia River's greatest coaches whose leadership, wisdom, and character are of the highest merit. I'd like to introduce that committee to you now. Mr. Tom Boyle, Mr. Jim Chapman, Mr. Gene DeTore, Mr. David Long, Mr. Ed Maxwell, Mr. John O'Rourke, and Mrs. Shirley Valios. This induction class is highlighting the first decade of Columbia River athletics.
The categories of induction are individuals, teams, coaches, community contributors to the athletic culture and traditions at Columbia River. Before the inductions begin, I wanted to share with you a bit about the commemorative plaques that each inductee will be receiving this evening. On each plaque, there is a commemorative coin designed from archived artwork of a chieftain. In addition, the names on each plaque have been mounted on top of a piece of Columbia River's original gym floor.
The first categories of inductees is being recognized for their individual accomplishments in athletics while here at Columbia River High School. Our first inductee, Mr. Roscoe Devine, class of 1965. Mr. Devine was a three-sport athlete at Columbia River and excelled in cross country and track. He was a two-time state champion in cross country, the state champion in the mile his senior year, and a member of the state championship cross country team in 1964. He was generally recognized as being one of the best high school runners in the country. Mr. Devine ran track and cross country at the University of Oregon and is still the youngest sub-4 minute miler in University of Oregon history. As an 18-year-old freshman, he ran a 3:59.1 mile, and his personal best of 3:56.3 is fifth all-time for the Ducks. In 1967 and in 1969, he won the Pac 8 mile title. Mr. Devine was also recently inducted into the University of Oregon Hall of Fame. Thank you, Mr. Devine.
Our next inductee is Mr. Rick Clausen, graduated in 1966.
Yeah!
Mr. Clausen is one of Columbia River's first high-achieving multiple sport athletes. For football, he was voted the second All-Star team and was the leading scorer in Clark County. He also received the Big Chief Award. In track, Mr. Clausen excelled as well. He was a sprinter on the record medley relay team.
Our next inductee is Mr. Rick Erickson, class of 1966. As part of a long list of great basketball players at Columbia River, Mr. Rick Erickson was the first. In 1966, he led the league in scoring as the #1 ranked chieftain, won league and district titles that season. Mr. Erickson helped lead the team to a 21-2 record, and he was voted by his teammates as most inspirational. Mr. Erickson also participated on the county all-star teams his junior and senior seasons. Mr. Erickson played college basketball at Washington State and was an all-Pac 8 player his senior year. He was drafted by the Indiana Pacers, the San Diego Rockets, and the Dallas Cowboys. Thank you.
Next is Mr. John Greenlaw. Accepting for Mr. Greenlaw this evening is his sister, Kathy. Mr. Greenlaw is a 1967 graduate. He was an outstanding football player and basketball player at Columbia River. In 1967, he was voted best blocker and team captain of the football team. Mr. Greenlaw was on the district champion basketball team and was voted as an all-league all-star. Mr. Greenlaw played college football as a defensive tackle for the Air Force Academy. He was voted team captain on his college team. Mr. Greenlaw served in the Air Force for 26 years, mostly as an F-15 fighter pilot. He retired as a lieutenant colonel in 1995.
Our next inductee is Mr. Randy Bruce, class of 1968. Mr. Bruce is another one of Columbia River's first all-star athletes in multiple sports. Randy Bruce was voted Athlete of the Year in 1968. He had outstanding seasons in football and baseball. In football, he was the league's leading scorer and was the runner-up for State Player of the Year. In baseball, he led the league in hitting, and both the football and baseball teams were league champions. In 1968, he was voted the most inspirational player and team captain for the baseball team. Mr. Bruce was the Clark County representative in the All-Star Baseball game in Seattle. In that game, he was the MVP runner-up. Mr. Bruce received a football scholarship to Montana State, and Mr. Randy Bruce then became a teacher and returned to his alma mater as a teacher and coach. Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Next is Mr. Charlie Lemke, class of 1969. Mr. Lemke excelled as an athlete in both football and wrestling at Columbia River. In his senior year, he was an all-conference center and linebacker. Mr. Charlie Lemke was second in the state wrestling tournament in 1969, helping his team win the team championship. Mr. Lemke walked on to play football at WSU and was the defensive captain. He wrestled 2 years at WSU and for 2 years at Pacific University. Mr. Charlie Lemke was third in the NAIA National Championships in 1976 and was an All-American in 1976 as well. In 1980, he wrestled in the Olympic trials. He taught and coached at Evergreen High School and Cheney Middle School throughout his career of 34 years.
Our next inductee is Mr. Rich Brock, class of 1969. A tenacious wrestler, Mr. Brock was a two-time state participant. In his senior year, he won the individual state championship in the 115-pound weight class and helped propel the Chieftains to a state title. He was voted captain of the wrestling team in 1969. Thank you, Mr. Brock.
Next is Mr. Mike Babb, class of 1969. Mr. Mike Babb excelled as a 3-year letterman in wrestling for the Chieftains. He was a state champion in 1968 as a junior and placed second as a senior in 1969, helping his team win the championship. Mr. Babb was also a valued member of the cross-country team. He was voted team captain in 1968. Mr. Babb received a full athletics scholarship to WSU.
Still read that?
Still read it.
Our next inductee, and there is no representative here tonight from Mr. Schoonover, is Mr. Jack Schoonover. I'll read his bio real quick. Mr. Schoonover is from the class of 1971. He was voted outstanding wrestler his season 1971 after an undefeated record in district championship. Mr. Schoonover also played fourth at state that season, and he was a two-time letterman. After Columbia River, Mr. Schoonover wrestled at West Point and was the team captain in 1975.
Next is Mr. Larry Smedley, class of 1971. Mr. Larry Smedley excelled in the sport of basketball and baseball at Columbia River. As the center, he averaged 20 points a game in his senior year. He had 337 rebounds and 479 points in that year as well. Mr. Smedley attended the University of Montana from 1971 to 1975. In 1975, he was a member of the Big Sky championship team. He also received all Big Sky honors in 1975. Mr. Smedley's basketball team competed in the Division I tournament in 1975 as well.
Our next inductee is Mr. Steve Hubbard, class of 1971. In keeping with a strong running tradition at Columbia River, Mr. Steve Hubbard excelled at cross country and track. He also participated in swimming. As a senior, Mr. Hubbard was the district cross country champion and was voted team captain. He helped his cross country team win the state championship in 1970. Thank you.
Next is Mrs. Denise Cromwell, class of 1971. Mrs. Cromwell was Columbia River's very first girls state champion. She won the 220-yard dash in 1970 for the Chieftains. This is quite an honor, as it would begin a rich history of success in girls athletics at Columbia River. Mrs. Cromwell has devoted her career to teaching, counseling, and coaching youth in Vancouver. Her coach, Mrs. Shirley Valios, will be presenting the induction plaque to her this evening.
Our next inductee is Shelley Reed Pryor, class of 1972. Mrs. Pryor is another one of Columbia River's trailblazing female athletes. She won the state championship in the long jump during her junior year in 1971 with a jump of 17 feet, 1 3/4 inches. This record was not broken until 1996. She was also a member of the girls basketball team. Mrs. Pryor was a cheerleader as well, always showing true chieftain's pride and spirit. Her coach, Mrs. Shirley Valios, will be presenting the induction plaque to her this evening. Yep. The second category of inductees is being recognized for their team accomplishments in athletics while at Columbia River High School. Our first team to go in is Columbia River's first ever state championship team. That is the 1964 boys cross country state champs. They were coached by Mr. Lee Cave. Here tonight, receiving their plaques. Some members did receive plaques already, but we would like for you to come up again. That's Mr. Dave Bischoff, Mr. Roscoe Devine, Mr. Terry Goodmanson, Mr. Mark Henry, Mr. Mike McGill, and Mr. Tim Ramberg.
Our next team to be recognized is the 1969 Wrestling State Champions, coached by Mr. Jim Thrasher. Mr. Rick Brock, Mr. Charlie Lemke, Mr. Craig Claybaugh, Mr. Gary Blair, Mr. Jim Acton, Mr. Mike Babb, Mr. Tony Meininger. Would you please come forward?
Our next team being inducted is the 1970 Boys Cross Country State Champions, again coached by Mr. Lee Cave. Members of that team here tonight are Mr. Steve Hubbard, Mr. Craig Edmonds, Mr. John Henry, and accepting on Mr. Henry's behalf is his brother Mark, Mr. Steve Dickinson, accepting on his behalf is his daughter April, Mr. Ed DeLawn, Mr. Rick Kangas, Mr. Rick Mickle, and Mr. Michael Blair.
That's all you do. The big T.
Yep.
And it says all of his kids.
Yeah.
And actually they spell caves, you know that, don't you? Yeah, but we don't have them.
The third category of inductees is being recognized for their dedication and outstanding achievement as a coach for Columbia River High School. The first coach being inducted tonight is Mr. Lee Cave, and accepting on Mr. Cave's behalf is his wife Audrey and their children Valerie, Ellen, Scott, and Bud, and Shalinda. Mr. Cave coached 6 sports over a 57-year coaching career. His chieftain tenure ran from 1962 to 1983. Thank you for showing your chieftain pride. Let me continue that bio. Mr. Cave built unshakable foundations for the cross-country and track and field programs. Under his guidance, the cross-country team went to state 14 times and placed in the top 4 7 times. As boys head track coach from 1970 to 1983, CR compiled a 72-12 dual meet record. His track and field teams won 6 league titles and came in second 4 times. Under his leadership, Columbia River had many top 10 state finishes and 8 individual state championships. Mr. Cave is also in the Washington State Cross Country and Track Coaches Hall of Fame, one of only 2 coaches to be inducted for 2 sports. Thank you.
Our next coach to be honored this evening is Mr. Earl Enos. Mr. Earl Enos was a very successful teacher and coach at Columbia River. He coached boys basketball for 17 years, and in those years, the Chieftains won the league championship 5 times and the district championship 4 times. He had 172 wins in 16 years. And 2 of his basketball teams, the 1965-66 team and the 1969-70 team, played in the state tournament. Mr. Enos also coached boys golf for 17 years. In addition, he also coached the girls basketball team for 9 seasons. Congratulations.
Our next coach is Columbia River's first head football and wrestling coach, Mr. Jim Thrasher. Mr. Thrasher had a distinguished 35-year coaching and teaching career. At Columbia River, he won league titles in both sports, and in 1969, he was the head coach of the state champion wrestling team. Mr. Thrasher was also a two-time Coach of the Year in wrestling. After Columbia River, Coach Thrasher coached football and baseball at the junior college and NCAA Division I levels. In 1995, he retired as principal of Goldendale High School. In 2001, he was elected to the Grays Harbor College Football Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Coach Thrasher.
Our next coach to be honored this evening is Mrs. Shirley Valios. Mrs. Shirley Valios dedicated her career to the students and athletes at Columbia River High School. She taught PE and was the girls' track and field coach for 33 years. She was the second of only 3 head girls' track coaches in Columbia River's history. In her career at Columbia River, she also coached girls volleyball for 8 years. In her track coaching tenure, she had 7 individual state champions. 2 were inducted into the Hall of Fame this evening. Her track and field teams were league champions 9 times, district champions 8 times. She was also honored twice as Coach of the Year by the Vancouver Coaches Association. Ms. Valios continues to show the utmost dedication to Columbia River. She is the official track and field photographer for the current track and field teams. I am deeply honored to be presenting this induction to Mrs. Valios this evening. She was my track coach at Columbia River and is now my mentor as I try to fill her shoes. She always does whatever she can to guide, encourage, and give wisdom. The Columbia River track and field teams are grateful for the tradition of excellence that she continues to pass on. Shirley Valios.
The final category of inductees is being recognized for their outstanding contributions to Columbia River High School. Our first contributor I would like to honor is Mr. Roy Lester Long, and accepting on Mr. Long's behalf is his stepdaughter, Renee Buswell. Mr. Long was Columbia River's first athletic director. He also had a very successful coaching career before coming to Columbia River. This coaching success proved a valuable asset in starting Columbia River's athletic programs. Mr. Long coached at what was then Vancouver High School. He coached basketball for 8 seasons and had 6 state tournament teams. In 12 years of track, his teams won 7 league championships and 11 district titles. Under his direction, Columbia River won 3 state championships in the school's first 7 years and multiple league and district titles in all sports.
The next contributor this evening to be recognized is Mr. Adair Hilligoss. Accepting on Mr. Hilligoss's behalf is his daughter-in-law, Barbara, and his granddaughter, Madison. In 1962, Mr. Hilligoss, or Higgs, as he was so fondly referred to as, was hired to be the music director of Columbia River High School. He held this position for the next 16 years. He directed and taught concert, marching, jazz, and pep bands, taking his marching bands to many parades, such as the Rose Festival Parade. Mr. Hilligoss became known for developing the best marching bands in Vancouver. In 1978, he became the supervisor of the Creative Arts Department of the Vancouver School District and retired in 1989. Mr. Hilligoss was very active in the community. He was a member of the 4th of July Committee since its first year in 1962, and was responsible for the musical entertainment during the Fort Vancouver 4th of July celebration. He was a member of the Hazeldale Salmon Creek Business Association and founded the Hazeldale Parade of Bands. Mr. Hilligoss also performed out in the Pops Orchestra, Northwest Bandmasters, West Winds, Battleground, and the Beaverton Community Bands. Adair Hilligoss.
Our next contributor is Wallace and Virginia Miller, and accepting for the Millers is their son, Dick Miller. Wallace and Virginia Miller set the standard for CR parent involvement. Mr. Miller was the founding president of the Chieftain Dads Club, the predecessor to today's Booster Club. The first big project in 1962 was to get the uniforms for the band. The raffle Mr. Miller organized was such a success, that fundraising pattern was used for the next 4 years. He personally made sure that all of Chieftain athletic and academic programs were supported. Mr. Miller rarely missed a Chieftain home game and was proud of Columbia River, win or lose. Mrs. Virginia Miller was Columbia River's first head secretary and registrar and worked at the school from 1962 to 1985. In addition to supporting her husband in many fundraising activities, at school she trained a generation of students in what we call today the River ideals of responsibility, integrity, values, excellence, and respect. She was Columbia River's biggest fan from day one. The Millers' 2 sons, Doug, class of 1965, and Dick, class of 68, are alumni, as well as their 3 grandchildren, Andy, class of 1993, Mark, class of 95, and Darcy, class of 98. We're looking forward to the Millers' great-grandchildren attending Columbia River in a few years.
Our final inductee of the evening is Mrs. Vanita Lou Murray. Accepting for Mrs. Murray is her son, Mike. It is with much adoration that I present this induction of Mrs. Vanita Murray. She touched so many lives with her kindness, encouragement, and grace. I would like to take this opportunity to read a passage that her son Michael wrote in honor of this occasion, and he will be representing her this evening. Vanita Murray gave 32 years of service with love and complete devotion to Columbia River High School. She was a proud chieftain and always carried what she deemed to be a great honor with pride from the time she began working at Columbia River High School through her retirement in 1994. Anyone who visited the library at Columbia River knew Vanita and how much she cared for the people and culture there. As her son, I grew up recognizing what a great place Columbia River was and felt justifiable pride sharing this special place with all members of the Murray family. Whether in supporting athletic competition or academics, Vanita Murray was proud to wear purple and gold for over 3 decades. I know that wherever my mom is today, she remains a loyal chieftain and loves the heritage that has made Columbia River great. Vanita Murray. In closing this evening, in keeping with the celebration of the 50th anniversary, this has been a true for the school and its supportive community. Again, we would like to thank the Hall of Fame Committee, the Columbia River staff, especially Mrs. Dana Selby and Mr. Dave Bennett, and administration for their dedication to this pride-filled tribute to the group of outstanding individuals sitting before us. The tradition of excellence at Columbia River can be attributed to the strong sense of family felt through the school's 50 years. We look forward to your continued support for future Hall of Fame inductions, and as the saying goes, once a chieftain, always a chieftain. Thank you.